Hello and welcome to Multifamily Elevated. My name's Suzanne Hopson, and I am super excited to talk to you about vision, people, and execution, and how you can utilize this information to elevate you and your team and your experience in multifamily. Brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, giving you the latest and greatest news and content across our multifamily sector. So let's jump in. Enjoy this episode of Multifamily Elevated and enjoy the climb. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Multifamily Elevated. I'm your host, Suzanne Hopson, and I am very excited, as I always am, but very excited today about our next guest that we are having on. Just welcome Shelly Steitz to our podcast today. I'm really excited to deep dive with you on KPIs. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about how messy all of our data is and all of our what we should be looking at or try to look at, and how we can get to a space where maybe we all agree on the same thing to look at. That would be nice too. But I've been in the industry for 15 years, worked in a lot of different companies, had views into how a lot of people use data, how a lot of different systems give you data in some nicer forms than others. So really excited to talk about this topic today.
Yeah, and again, thank you, Shelly. And you don't do yourself justice, by the way.
Oh,
I think you've worked with 25 lease ups across U.S. markets. You're currently working with our buddy Janet is it Cadence Marketing? Is that how
yep.
we call it?
Cadence Marketing Solutions. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that group, I need to find out if you actually run. That's one of the things that I need to find out. Like, is there actually a run group?
Well, there is no actual running involved, but I do run occasionally. And
Well, yeah, I've been wondering because I think I'm going to join, but I wasn't
yes,
sure because I saw
yes.
running Cadence, and so I was like, oh, I
Yes,
don't know. Okay.
as part of Cadence, we do have the Run Club, which is more about running your own marketing departments and really having. It's really the opportunity for a lot of us in marketing and multifamily we're really peerless. Like, we don't have anyone within our company that speaks our language, that understands what we're trying to do and to achieve. And so what Run Club provides is a community of multifamily marketers and vendors, and to just really be that space where you can talk about um, what's happening in your life, and how can you actually level up what you are doing, and who else has experienced the same pain points as you. So it's an opportunity to really just have those peers that understand what you're going through. I remember years ago, I was complaining to my boss, like, there's nobody, I don't have a peer here. Like, I don't have
Mhm.
someone I can talk to about what I'm doing, um, in the way that a lot of other people had at that time. So to have something like Run Club is just really special, and I've learned so much from the members there as well. Um, it's just an amazing group to have a hive mind to work with.
Yeah, and of course, our buddy Janet behind, the mastermind behind it all. You're so lucky you get to work with her that close. It's so
It
amazing.
is, yeah, it's been a fun year working with her so far.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're going to be deep diving into KPIs. You and I have had the opportunity to talk a little bit off camera about the importance of them and how messy they really can be. And, the work that Here to Elevate does and that I do with clients, we do focus in on KPIs quite a bit because those are like the North Stars, the beacons, the things we're trying to achieve. And, I've seen in my experience, it's been messy. I've walked into companies where they're either measuring the wrong thing or they're just looking at these numbers every day and it doesn't really matter anymore. They don't carry the same weight. There's all kinds of things around KPIs. Even KPI conversation is a little ugly right now. People are
Mhm.
tired of talking about KPIs, but I think they're a powerful tool. So, first question about that. You've said that attribution models are often lying to us, and I'm so I'm anxious to dig into that. So, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions when we're interpreting the marketing data that we see?
Yeah. There is this what we see a lot in multifamily is we're looking at this last touch attribution. That's the most common model. Certainly there's other models in there as well. But what we're really missing is that full customer journey. We really rely again on the last touch and not what's happening at the upper funnel. It's really hard to track. It's getting harder to track, frankly, with some of the limitations that are placed on us on our own websites and some of the laws that are coming out, but we're really not able to identify what was that customer journey actually like. So if you're really only attributing it to your ILS, or in most cases it's to your website, you're really missing the full picture and not looking at what is actually driving people to come to your website. The website is a destination, and I'll probably talk about that a little bit more because it's starting to become like drive by was maybe 10,
Yeah.
15 years ago. And we don't really know, we kind of ignore what's bringing people to our website, or oftentimes we'll attribute a lease to the chatbot. And certainly, like, the chatbot is part of that converting of that prospect, but it is not necessarily how they found out about your property. It's not the marketing or the advertising that brought them into you and made them aware of your property. We're really missing that piece of building out that upper funnel KPI that tells us like what is actually moving the needle as far as our brand awareness. And not only that, if we're only looking at a last touch attribution, we're looking at a really lagging data point. And certainly we're kind of looking at like, okay, somebody got here, they finally got to our team, but what were the 10, 15 steps that brought them here? I remember seeing in a report released by CoStar a couple years ago that most prospects will spend at least 10 hours researching their their next move. And so if we're only looking at the 10, 15 minutes that they spent on our website, if they spent that long on there, we're missing probably about 9 hours and 45 minutes of time that they spent researching their move.
A really good point.
Yeah.
Really good. There's several good points there. And I think they're spending even less time because they're looking for more impactful information faster, right? So
Right.
even more important that we're able to identify what that looks like and what that is. Yeah, it's really good. What do you think operators should be doing instead to get a more accurate picture of what's working?
Certainly. In the really easy, short term, accessible data that most people should have is to look at your referrals on your Google Analytics. Where is your traffic for your website coming from? And I find a lot of times we don't actually have that like data that carries through to what referrals actually attributed to who submitted a lead on our website, but you can start to make some inferences there. Like if, for example, 5% of your traffic is coming from your an ILS specifically, you can look at how engaged those visitors are to your website and start to make some assumptions based on how many leases you actually received from your website. So if it was like, and I'm just using ILS as an example. I'm not advocating as ILS is necessarily like your strategy, but you can say that, okay, that source provided about 5% of our traffic to our website. We received this many leases from, our property website. We can make an assumption, an educated guess that like 5% of those leases came from this source. So it's not an exact science, but it does help provide a more full picture of what's happening than just having property website listed as the source.
Well, now it made me think of another question, and it
Okay.
really comes from some of my experiences working on the other side of the table as a marketer to an executive on the leadership team about the exactness of the KPI and
Right.
how assumptions can be made, but it's not an exact science. Do you find that we're still expecting it to be an exact science to some extent if we're the ones holding the purse strings?
I mean, I ideally it would be. We'd be able to have that like, yes, we spent this amount of money and on this exact source, maybe our paid search campaigns are cost per click, and it resulted in this exact lease. The fact of the matter is that prospect didn't only experience that cost per click campaign. in their search and probably was not the only place that they experienced us. One thing that I found to really help drive home points that I'm trying to make is to make the data visual. So anytime I
Mhm.
can show graphs, anytime I can show trends, anytime I can show anything over time is really
Mhm.
helpful. In one case, I actually showed we had some we had a property where we actually pulled back on marketing because they were doing well because they were full. Not necessarily what I would recommend, but you get that pressure to save the spend. And our leads went down, and then we ended up having a lot of notices come in. And so we ramped up the amount of money that we were spending. And I was able to, about 6 months later, be like, okay, I want to just show you this graph that shows, and it wasn't a seasonality because this was all happening sort of in a slow season, but I showed them the graph of the lagging data. So about 60 days after we beefed up our spend, we started to see those leads go up. And in
Mhm.
a basically the exact same trajectory, like the amount of money we started spending, that was reflected in how our leads went up. And so to really be able to show that data visually, like this is the impact. And again, I can't say, correlation isn't necessarily causation, but that's a pretty big correlation to see that those actual, the exact same trajectory and the amount of that we were spending was reflected in the amount of leads and the amount of leases we were getting about 60 days later.
Yeah. Sometimes it's simple like that and sometimes it's more complicated, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The trending data is important and being able to have that. And now we have different ways of measuring it. We've had ways of measuring it for a long time. But I think that is, even getting complex. So I know we'll get into that in
Yeah.
just just a second here. Because I don't know about you or who you're talking to, but I imagine you're having the same issue as I am. There's so many dashboards to look at. It's like it's data overload, and what data really is driving the decision. Um,
Right.
yeah. So tell me a little bit more from your experience and what you're seeing. How are you helping people with that problem? Because it's
Hmm.
not just marketing either. It's data overload. Period.
Yes. That is something that is honestly like evolving for me day by day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
For
I try
sure.
to think of it less as like, let's look at, because there is a past role where I would spend an entire week a month of 40 hours of my time. I tracked it of just putting together reports and pulling the data and putting it in a format that could be read and likely probably was not read, honestly. Like you put together those nice reports and it goes off to someone and they maybe look at it and they say, oh, that's interesting. And then they move on. And I was spending 40 hours of my time that could have been spent elsewhere, really being more strategic than it would have been to pull all of these data points. But I try to think about it now as how are we looking at some of those bellwether data points and what are those bellwether data points? And certainly it starts really basically at how many leases did you get? I mean, that is the basic, like, that's what we need to do. We need to make money, right? So if we're not
Yeah.
getting leases, something's not happening here. And then we need to
Yeah.
dig in more. And you can start to work back because leases are, like I said before, more of a lagging data point than some of our other things that we might look at, other KPIs that we might look at on a monthly basis or even a weekly basis, and you start to work your way back. So you're looking at your leases, you're looking at the amount of tours you're getting, you're looking at the amount of leads you're getting. From there, you can look at how many leads are we actually getting to our website, or how many impressions are we getting on our website, or how many impressions are we getting on our cost per click campaigns. Those are, I would say, very basic KPIs that should be looked at every month. Um, and then starting to put those into, and those are easy things that you don't have to spend a lot of time putting
Mhm.
into a simple chart that you can track over time as well. Because one of the frustrations I have with most of the data that we're getting and most of the reports that we're getting from all of these dashboards is nobody's really just showing me, like, I just want to know how many leases, how many leads, how many impressions I've gotten over the much time we've been using the system. Because I want to start to see these micro trends. That's something that I've tracked myself. And
Mhm.
I started to see, certainly, we all know about seasonality of April to September, but I actually started to recognize some of those once I started putting that data into like the past 6 years at this company that I was working at. I started to see some of these micro trends. So one of the things that I noticed was we'd start to see leads bounce back a little bit in January. We'd start it to go up actually quite a bit in February and March. And then we'd actually see it lag again in April before it started to ramp up again in May. So I started to see kind of these micro seasons, if you will. And
Mhm.
actually, the month year over year that we would see the lowest leads and leases was November. I think we traditionally think it's December, like that's the darkest time. It actually, in the data that I was seeing over our entire portfolio, over at least 6 years, like November was the lowest point. So, what I really would where I'd love to see us go is to really start to look at more of these overall trends that are happening. And I just want someone to give me a nice graph that just shows me aging over time.
Yeah, yeah, and you bring up a really good point about, making sure that you are not making assumptions. Like, that's
Right.
what data's for, right? It's really
Exactly.
to give proof to those assumptions that you may be having, and so and we all do that.
Hmm.
Whether it's marketing or any of the other parts of the business. So, data. I'm a big data freak, so always being able to back it up, I think is wise. It also gives you, direction, right? Like on where you should go next,
Right.
because it's a story. It's telling you something about, what the business needs, and so yeah, I really like that. You've obviously worked across several markets, and so we talked about seasonality, and we know that that plays some part. But
Hmm.
there are some markets that don't have that. They have,
Yes.
different challenges and pain points. But what do you see, and how do you view like these vanity metrics that we sometimes get caught in, that we're measuring, but really have no real substance towards helping us manage our business? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. What's hard is we tend to the data can you can make the data tell you any story that you want it to at the end of the day. I mean, if we all can kind of pick out the things like, oh yeah, we saw a 50% increase in leases over last month, but it's like last month you had one lease and this month you had two. Certainly, like you can manipulate that data in a way
Good
that
point.
makes you feel good. So that's where I think we really have to look at percentages are great. I love a percentage. It makes us all feel good, but we actually have to look at what those real numbers are at the end of the day, because in in some case we have to look at the amount of numbers that we're actually looking at instead of just a percentage. Because sometimes a 7% increase is actually pretty good because um, the numbers that we're dealing with are so many versus like and I'm losing the actual term that I'm trying to pull out of my head here, but versus if we're looking at some small numbers like I used the example of before, that's not really telling us the story.
Yeah.
I also am somebody who I hate to look at a report that is just like a glorified Excel spreadsheet with a ton of numbers on it, and then they're like, "Hey, if you look at all this data we pulled." I think that there's this what we're really seeing a lot of now is people are just pushing a lot of data at you. They're like, "We have all of this data and we're going to just show it all to you and it's going to feel really impressive because we have so
Mm,
much of it." And you're not looking at any of that. Like nobody's like it's certainly great to have if you need to do a deep dive, but at the end of the day, I love a dashboard that is simple. I love a dashboard that is visual,
mhm.
and that for me is what is actually valuable. Not something that is like here's 100 different reports and I feel like out of the box, a lot of our CRMs do this to you where they're like, we have all of these reports, but the reports are just tons and tons of numbers in a glorified spreadsheet that you're not actually going to pour through. You may like push it on your intern or your marketing coordinator and be like, try to make sense out of this data and show it to me in a way that I can actually understand and waste their time and waste
And the
your time.
40 hours of building the report that you were talking
Exactly.
about, that ends up happening.
Yep.
Well, that brings me to another thought about, how to pick the right KPIs for your audience, right? So I think
Mhm.
about our leasing folks and, the
Right.
KPIs that they need to be concerned about and are looking at are different than, the marketing director. Perhaps they're more finite at the site level because they are, really dealing with day to day, week to week.
Mhm.
And so, have you seen any changes or trends in how we're measuring leasing as an example, leasing success? How does a leasing consultant know that they're winning?
Yeah, that's where I think that conversion ratio really comes into play, and where they can say, okay, like I got this many leads, but how many of them actually turned into a tour? And that's where I would start to, that's where you want to start doing some of those deeper dives, like um, how many of those leads did convert into tours? Is it, and then it can be, is it that I am not responding to all of those leads? Is it that we're just not getting qualified leads? That's where you can start to ask some of those bigger questions. And looking at, and then again, this is where I think looking back at some of the historical data is helpful, because if you're looking
Mhm.
at, somebody says to me on September 1st, well, we aren't getting as many leads as we got the previous month. And you're like, me as a marketer, I'm saying, yeah, of course you're not. Cause it is, in my market in September, everybody
Mhm.
disappears. People start disappearing on August 1st, honestly. I can also look back at like, okay, a year ago, were you getting that? Is that what we saw? How many leads did you get a year ago? And sometimes I'll look back and I'll be like, actually, you're getting like twice as many leads as you got the same time period a year ago. And that tells me we maybe need to look deeper into what is happening, because we're delivering more leads than we were in this time period a year ago. And maybe there's something else, some other factors that are happening that are taking place to affect how you're actually able to convert those leads to tours that we need to dive into a little bit deeper. So I think having that
Mhm.
historical data is really helpful, and that is actually really hard to compare a lot of times when I talk about some of those. Sure, like we're going to send you this performance over time, but we're going to send it to you in the most unreadable format that you can actually um so you're going to have to parse all of that information out yourself, and it's not really actually going to tell you a lot. So that's where I really try to spend my time, is like, let's pull out some of that higher level information and put that into a graph, put it into um looking at it over time versus just looking at like the past 30 days, because
Mhm.
sure, you may have seen a drop in leads from August to September, but that's expected. And ideally, we would have planned for that. I tried to plan for that in how I'm budgeting and how I'm actually like pushing out advertising, knowing that we are going to start to see those lagging leads in about 30 days, right? So we're trying to plan ahead for that. The other thing that often is overlooked, I see a lot of times when we're looking at how our properties are performing, is notices, and tying that into
Mhm.
like those expected notices, and tying that into what your marketing strategy is. So if we know that every year in September, everyone didn't really plan ahead in our lease up, and we had a lot of leases expire in September or October, we know we have to plan ahead for that. We know that we have to really put a push in place in summer when we do see a lot of leads and we do see a lot of people looking to move, or we need to actually even have the team adjust when their leases are expiring, start to work on spreading that out over the year, or having it happen at a time when we see a lot of people moving. So that is something that we really when I work directly with teams, try to impress upon, like, okay, when are your notices coming in? When do you know that you have expiring leases? Let's plan ahead for what that's going to look like in terms of your marketing, and making sure
Yeah.
that we're doing a push like 60 days before that happens, 90 days before that happens, that we're trying to get those people some eyeballs, some brand awareness prior to those leases expiring.
Yeah, I love it, and thank you for that. All that great advice and those suggestions. I think it's really helpful for people to realize and sort of recalibrate to what they need to be focused on, because that's another thing that I
Mhm,
think. If we're really busy or we're struggling or in the throes, we're not necessarily focused on the right number, and that can really be helpful to make sure that we're working backwards and figuring out where the breakdowns are. I know that in multifamily sometimes there's a blending of marketing and sales that occurs that in some other industries is very, very defined and separate. And it's always fascinated me, being in multifamily, being in marketing, and also being in sales, how they are just so integral to each other. And the
mhm.
KPIs are so reliant on each other for success. And, this isn't something we talked about, but I'm curious from your perspective, how are you seeing the relationship changing now with more data and more access with AI, the ability to be able to really narrow in on the problem quicker? How's that relationship going? Do you see it changing at all or
Mhm.
morphing into something that's working better or just has more challenges?
It's a great question. I mean, better living through technology, right? I say sarcastically. No,
Yeah.
there technology is so great. Like, it allows us so many more opportunities to reach people, to have them contact us, to have them work with the property, to allow us to take things off of our team's plates. Those
Mhm.
initial just responses, like, we cannot respond fast enough manually. Like, there's no way that our teams can immediately respond to a lead when it comes in. We hope that they do. We want them to do that. The reality is there's a lot of different things that are going on. So technology allows us so many more opportunities to reach our prospects, to have our prospects reach out to us, to get their to pre-qualify themselves, to really narrow down where they actually want to live. But on the other side of that, what we see is that handoff from that technology to our team is
Mhm.
oftentimes very flawed. Either our teams are not trained on how to receive that information and process it, or it breaks down and it's not getting to our teams at all. So that's where we want to look at the data. And if someone is telling me, sure, like, I can look at, okay, the website sent 25 leads to this property over the past week, and they're telling me they didn't receive any leads. I need to actually investigate that and be like,
Mhm.
what is the breakdown here? And sometimes you'll find out that a tracking number is broken, or that a form fill on your website isn't working. And even though your data is telling you that you got all of these leads, your on-site team didn't actually receive any of those leads. And that's when you need to make sure you're fixing the problem. And it's on both marketing and the on-site team to make sure that those things are functioning. And that's why you still need to look at that very basic data of, like, this is how many leads we are sending, and the team should be telling you how many leads did they actually receive. What
Yeah.
are they
Oh
actually
yeah.
doing? And having that
Yeah.
conversation and having those conversations. And on top of that, we need to make sure that, like, if we have a very fancy AI chatbot that is gathering all of this information from our prospects, that our team, one, knows how to receive that information, and two, how to actually act on it. So if you have in your AI chatbot, they're giving all of this great data, like, I'm looking for a two-bedroom. I wanna spend $1,500 a month. God, I would love to have a two-bedroom for $1,500 a month,
Well,
depending on
it's
where you
funny you
live.
said the same thing. It's funny.
But I wanna be on the top floor. Like, by golly, your team should understand, like, okay, when they call that prospect, they can say, "I see that you're looking for a two-bedroom. You wanna be on the top floor, and you wanna spend $1,500 a month. Here are the 3 units that match, or 3 apartments that match what you're looking for. And it's telling me that you are looking for a October 1st move-in date. And they don't have to spend that time pre-qualifying their prospect. They can now move on to a more substantive conversation and close on them. On
Love
t-
it.
yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Did you have another
Oh,
thought there, Shelly?
I had a
Yeah.
thought and then it just poof disappeared. It was a really good point. It'll come
Rookie.
back.
I know this is such a great conversation. I'm going in all kinds of different directions.
That's
When I think
okay.
about, yeah, when I think about, when I'm working with clients and we are talking about mapping out the customer journey and then how to automate or augment that with technology or person, which one, human or technology, and where. It begins to formulate the measurements there as well. And I want to ask this because I think that has not been done well
Yes.
historically.
Mhm.
People that attempt to do this, it's almost like, do not attempt to do this alone. Please find an expert to help you do this because you will screw this up royally. And I only say that because I've done that.
Yeah.
I've screwed up. It's not easy for a layman to set in motion the right workflow for response, right? And for guiding your prospect through that journey effectively, and being a differentiating force in doing that. Like, everybody
Mhm.
can do it, but how do you really set yourself apart in doing that? And I know we're getting better with our technology, but I talk to people a lot about this. Is it tech first? Is it people first? Like, how do you really do it well? And you said there's so many leads coming in. We've got to have some sort of auto response. And then what? Like, what are you seeing as the best way? And you don't have to go through the whole workflow
No,
because it's
but
different. I know it
you've
varies.
actually jogged my memory on what I was going to say.
Okay, same page. Same page. Love it.
Um, right. I won't go through a whole workflow, but the important thing when you are putting those workflows together is identifying, one, what is the touch point that is human and what is the touch point that is technology.
Mhm.
And within that, allowing the humans to identify themselves as humans and allowing the technology to identify itself as technology.
Mm.
And I will tell you why I feel that is important, because most people at this point understand when they are interacting with a bot, or when with AI, and that will actually change how they interact with it. So if you know that, like, this is, Dave, it's like, even though it says, "Hi, I'm Dave, I'm here to help you." If they know that it is AI that they're interacting with, they will ask questions differently. And because they will know that that will change how they get responses
We
versus
all
if
do
you're.
it.
Yep, exactly. So I don't think that there's any need to pretend that Dave, your AI bot, is a human. People understand that and they're going to treat it differently, because I would very much like to have somebody be like, your AI bot Dave is terrible and, like, you need to fix it in this way, versus, like, your leasing agent Dave is terrible and
Mhm.
you guys do not know how to do customer service. I think people give you some grace if they know if it's technology, that they wouldn't give you if they think that they're talking to a human being named Dave who's like, sorry, I can't answer that question, I'm going to have to pass you off to my colleague, right? So I think that's where that, like, interaction between, that's part of that technology, that handoff from the technology to your team. The other side, flip side of that, is allowing your humans to identify themselves as being human.
Mhm.
It is perfectly okay in your emails, in your phone calls, or however you're interacting with a prospect to say, "Oh, hi, I'm Shelly. I am the leasing agent on site, and I can help you with your questions. If ever you want to talk to a human being, know that this email chain is the email chain with the human being." Because they're going to get some automations and, like, some more salesy emails from your AI or whatever you're using. You might not even be using AI, but, like, they will know that this is the actual real person they're interacting with. And in
Yeah.
that instance, it is okay to not have a beautifully branded email because that's going to feel more authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, and authenticity is where it's at. I mean, we all
Mhm.
want that. We all want the real deal, not
Yes.
just something cooked up and baked for us. And yeah, I think that's an excellent thing. And now it made me think of KPIs and technology. Do we ever build out KPIs for our bot? Like, are we seeing like, oh, my bot has a terrible conversion?
I
I
mean,
need to
yes,
rate them.
you should. That should be like, you should be tracking if you have a chatbot on your website or an AI lead nurturing tool, you should be tracking the amount of conversations and what those conversions look like. And that's not to say that your bot is doing a terrible job. Like, it may be that they actually answered that person's question and they didn't need to go to your leasing agent. So like, I would look at what those conversations are if you're looking at that KPI as one of your metrics, looking at what those conversations are and if it's like answering those questions. Because if it may be that if they're handing it off to your team, that the bot actually isn't doing a good job. Because it
Mhm.
might be that they're getting to a point where like, I can't answer that question. Here's now you have to go talk to the team. And it might be something very simple of someone asking you if you have a pool, which your bot should know.
Yes. Yes. I'm gonna name drop Lisa Trozine. She speaks a lot about the
Yes.
human touch in the process, and I just love her relentlessness about making sure that we really are listening to what our prospect wants and, answering to that. And
Yes.
where I think she points out a lot of the flaws are in the technology not being able to or not being programmed to, and us not seeing it quickly enough that it isn't really answering the questions of our prospects and their
Mhm.
needs, right? So it's just very it's highly interesting to me that we could, really go down a rabbit hole. It's probably another conversation we're gonna have to have,
Oh
Shy,
my
'cause
gosh, yeah. I mean,
man,
let's talk about
have to
phone
have it
calls
done.
next.
Right, right, right. I know, oh my gosh, oh my god. I know, see, you just scratch the surface on KPIs, really. It's an amazing topic for sure, and, we're at time. I can't even
Oh
believe
my
that we
gosh.
have yes, we've been on for almost an hour, so it's been such an amazing conversation. I know we're gonna have to pick it up again because there's more stuff that we need to talk about. But before we let everybody go, a couple of things. I'd love for you to share your wisdom because you are one smart lady
Oh, thank you.
with marketers out there, people who are aspiring to become leaders in the marketing realm. You know, from your perspective as someone that's been in the seat and is in the seat, what advice could you give for the marketer today to really be able to navigate the waters? Because it's a different arena.
Mhm.
Marketing looks different. What would be the piece of advice you would give people that are dipping their toe in or who are in and trying to navigate that as a role for
Absolutely.
them?
One of the biggest pieces of advice I would give, and I will say this because it's not always something that I've done well, but to make sure that you're tailoring your message to the appropriate person at your company. And what I mean by that is to make sure when you're talking to your leasing teams that you are talking at their level of what they need to know and what is important to them. Same thing with your peers as far as your managers and your regionals and your executives. They will think different things are important and they will have different priorities. And you want to make sure that you are delivering any message you have, whether it's a KPI, that for your on-site teams that you're delivering it in a way that you get their buy-in and that feels important to them instead of a lot of jargon. I've definitely gone in and been like jargon, 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 right? And they're like, what are you even talking about? So making sure that you're
Oh, man. Yeah.
yeah, delivering that message in a way that they can both act on it and that makes them feel like you understand what they're going through. Because
Mm.
it's really, and we do this all the time. I do this too. We're very quick to be like, well, nobody's calling anybody back. And like instead of addressing like the issue of why you're not calling people back, like
Yeah.
what's happening on site. Same with your regionals and your managers, making sure that they have the information that they need to feel they can act on and be successful. And then also speaking up to your executives and delivering a message of like, here's what we need to actually, like, the thing that's important to them is that they want to make money, right? I mean, like, that's a little basic, but I mean, like, how is that affecting their bottom line of making sure that apartments are leased and that they're not spending too much to do it? So you really have to tailor that message across your company. And it is hard to do, but honestly, like sometimes just putting something into like an email that you've written into Chat GPT and being like, can you adjust this to the audience of our on-site leasing team, and having them
Yeah.
come back and give you that advice. Don't necessarily take it wholesale from what Chat GPT says because they're not always right, but it gives you the starting point on how to communicate with folks.
I love that. I love that. And you're right. I mean, we've all done it where we've just delivered a message that didn't hit home. People just tilt their head
Mm-hmm.
like my dog Crane does sometimes when he just doesn't get what I'm saying to him. And yeah, yeah, not speaking the language. Well, first off, I would just want to say thank you so much,
Oh,
Shelly,
thank you.
for coming on and talking about KPIs. It's been such a great conversation. And how do people reach you or Cadence Marketing? How can they get a hold of you and pick your brain if they want to? What's the best way?
Absolutely. So I am on LinkedIn, just Shelly Steitz, Steitz. And then Cadence Marketing Solutions is cadencems.com. So that's where you can find all the information about Run Club if you're interested in that. And also, we have our upcoming Cadence Connect event happening on November 11th in Minneapolis. So that should be a really good, it's just kind of a little mini half-day conference that's really focused on networking and having personal interactions. That's kind of what we're all about, is really connecting people. That's why it's called
Hmm.
Cadence Connect. um,
Makes total
so
sense.
recommend that people come and check that out as well.
Shelly Steitz, what a pleasure. Thank you so much
Yes,
again.
thank you. This is lovely. Thank you for having
Well,
me.
yeah, we will have you on again soon. I
Oh,
hope.
I hope so. Yeah. Anytime. I love this is what I love talking about. So I can always come on and talk about it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again, Shelly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Multifamily Elevated, where we hope that you are inspired and ready to go, elevated to take on your next challenge in multifamily. So if you liked this episode, please subscribe, like, comment, and of course, share with your network. And don't forget that this was brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network, that is also sharing the latest and greatest in trends, ideas, and content across our multifamily space. Until next time, keep elevating, and we'll talk soon.